to come to Scotland. So in terms of employment in Scotland, has the Secretary of State and colleagues sat down with the Home Office in terms of encouraging more migration?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Government will work closely with the Migration Advisory Committee, and we welcome the contribution that migrants play to the economy. We'll take no lessons from a party that has consistently said that the positive destinations for people in Scotland is a 0-hours contract, and who sat last night on their hands when we dealt with the GB energy bill.
Let me try and challenge the member in a spirit of collegiality. They have committed to working with the Scottish Government. Now, the member for Nahealing Indian Yar, who is in his place, has talked about when it comes to migration policy, no one size fits all, and it shouldn't be beyond us to devise ways to attract more people to work and settle here. So will he from those benches commit in what they've done that the Scottish and UK governments should work together, and will he commit to a meeting between both those governments so we can take forward more migration to Scotland in the way they committed to and we committed to and business is crying out for?
Mr. Speaker, we have committed to Scottish representation on the Migration Advisory Committee, which would go a long way in order to deal with these issues, but it's also for the Scottish Government to do things like build houses in areas where we need more migration in order to encourage people to come to live in Scotland.
Gregory Campbell.
Fine, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, Scotland is likely proud of its 6 World Heritage sites. As my honourable friend will appreciate, responsibility for planning decisions for large-scale energy projects in Scotland rests with the Scottish Government ministers. The UK Government works closely with the Scottish Government to deliver for Scotland while respecting devolution. I meet regularly with my Scottish Government counterparts on these issues.
Gregory Campbell.
Thank the Minister. 23 years, huh? I thank the Secretary of State for his reply. In any discussions he will have, would he take account of the fact that, number one, I have written to UNESCO about the potential of a huge offshore wind farm very close to the Giant's Causeway and the UNESCO World Heritage Site that exists there. And the Communities Minister in Northern Ireland has also met UNESCO. Will he make representations to ensure that all considerations are given account of, to ensure that people know the potential compromise and problems that may exist to that World Heritage Site there?
Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, I'm glad the member for East Londonderry hasn't lost any of his popularity in the House. It would be inappropriate for me to comment on planning decisions for large-scale energy projects in Scotland. This is a devolved responsibility. I do, of course, recognise the importance of considering the protection of local assets when developing renewable projects, particularly our cherished World Heritage sites.
That completes questions. I wish to remind the House that the following horrendous, terrible incident in Southport on the 29th of July, a suspect is awaiting trial, having been charged with multiple offences. That means the House sub judice resolution is engaged and references should not be made to the case. I know that all honourable members wish to see justice done in this case. It is therefore of paramount importance that nothing is said in this House which could potentially prejudice a proper trial or lead to it being abandoned. I know it can be frustrating when we can see reports in the media of the matters that we are not free to discuss here, but that arises from Parliament's constitutional relationship with the courts. More importantly, at the heart of this case are 3 young girls. We all want to see justice done for them and for their families, and for others injured in and affected by this appalling incident. Speculation about the cases, including comments made in this House, could seriously risk prejudicing proceedings. I know that none of us would ever wish to do that. Therefore, it would be wrong of me to exercise a waiver in this case, and members should not refer to it or risk prejudicing this case. Of course, I understand that members have legitimate questions about the circumstances surrounding this case. There will be no doubt wanting ministers to commit that they will come to the House and answer those questions once the legal proceedings are concluded. I give my assurance that I will ensure there are ample opportunities to do so. My understanding is that this trial is expected to start in January, and if members have questions about the operation and the decision on St Judas sub judice's resolution, they can speak to the clerks and the Speaker's Council. In the meantime, our thoughts are with the family and friends of Bibi, Elsie and Alice, and all of those who were injured and affected on this horrendous day. Before I call the Prime Minister, I would like to mark the fact that this is the last time the Right Honourable Member for Richmond and Northallerton will appear at the dispatch box during PMQs. There's a bit more to do afterwards, but he has spoken at this dispatch box as Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Prime Minister, Leader of the Opposition, and after today, we all look forward to his continued contributions from the backbenches. We wish him and his family well in the future endeavours. And I say personally, thank you for a working relationship. We now come to Prime Minister's questions. I call Katrina Murray.
Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish everyone celebrating in the UK and around the world a joyful Diwali, a time to come together to celebrate and focus on a brighter future. Last Diwali, the leader of the opposition and his family lit the deers outside 10 Downing Street. It was a significant moment in our national story. The first British Asian Prime Minister is a reminder that this is a country where people of every background can fulfil their dreams, and it makes us all proud to be British. Mr. Speaker, as you've just referenced, as this is our last exchange across the dispatch boxes, I wanted to take this opportunity to thank the Leader of the Opposition for his service. Now, of course, we've had political disagreements, ideological differences, we've argued at some length, but I want to thank him for his hard work, for his commitment, and for his decency in everything that he has done. And I too wish him and his family the very best for whatever the future may hold for them. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Katrina Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to associate myself with the remarks made by the Prime Minister. Cumbernauld, in my constituency, was promised an elective and diagnostic treatment centre by the Scottish Government in 2021. This has continued to be delayed and is now alleged to be mothballed. What assurances can the Prime Minister give me that any Barney consequentials from today's budget are used to benefit my constituents and not be held on to by the Scottish Government?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for her question. I'm sorry to hear about the delays affecting her constituents. The party opposite oversaw years of mismanagement and chaos, and the impact on Scottish NHS is evident. This Labour government is committed to delivering for the Scottish people, including making sure that we have an NHS fit for the future. And the Chancellor will set out details in just a few moments.
Leader of the Opposition, Rishi Sunak.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for your kind words, and indeed thank you to the Prime Minister for his kind words. Indeed, no Prime Minister looks forward to PMQs, but I always did like this pre-budget one, because it was, for a change, nice not to be the main event and just the warm-up act. But as you said, Mr. Speaker, today is my last appearance at PMQs, and I'm happy to confirm reports that I will now be spending more time in the greatest place on earth, where the scenery is worthy. The scenery is indeed worthy of a movie set, and everyone is a character. That's right, Mr. Speaker. If anyone needs me, I will be in Yorkshire. So, and as an adopted Yorkshireman, I'm particularly looking forward to doing the coast-to-coast walk that runs through my constituency and many others. Since 2015, we've made significant progress with a campaign to make it a national trail, and indeed, Natural England are close to concluding their work. So, can I ask the Prime Minister to ensure that the coast-to-coast does indeed become Britain's greatest national trail, and in preparation for my return to the backbenches, would he meet with me to discuss it?
Mr. Speaker, I thought he was about to ask me to join him on the walk. But certainly, I will meet him, and it is an important point.
Mr. Speaker, that is very kind of the Prime Minister. I know he's. I know he's partial to the Lake District, but perhaps we can tempt him over to our end as well. Now, Yorkshire is not just famous for its walks, but also for being home to some of England's greatest cricketers. Now, sadly, no one's going to put me on that list, Mr. Speaker, but who knows? I've got a lot more time to practice now. So, but cricket does have the power to bring people together from all communities and give them fantastic opportunities, as shown so powerfully by Andrew Flintoff's recent documentary. Yeah. Now, we also lead the world in female participation, and that will stand us in good stead when we host the Women's World Cup in 2026 and when cricket becomes an Olympic sport in 2028. So could I therefore ask the Prime Minister to continue government support for the England and Wales Cricket Board's new initiative to get cricket into vastly more state schools, fostering a whole new generation of cricketers for us all to cheer on at every level?
Prime Minister. Yes, is the answer to that question. And the point is a really important one. We celebrate cricket, it does bring communities together, but it's also really important for children and young people to enjoy sport, lots of different sports, because it gives them a confidence that they might not otherwise have. It gives them the ability to work in a team and teaches them about skills like leadership. So I'm fully supportive.
Now, our two predecessors, Sir Tony Blair and Lord Hague, have repeatedly come together and powerfully argued in their joint reports that it is vital for the future prosperity of Britain's economy, society and public services for us to be a world leader in technology and innovation. Now, the Prime Minister and I may not yet be at our joint report writing stage yet, but in a similar spirit of cross-party agreement, could I ask him to find his inner tech bro and continue to support emerging British tech businesses and establish our country as the home of AI growth and innovation?
Prime Minister.
Yes, and this is a really important point. The Leader of the Opposition held a summit last year on AI, which was very important. We have been bringing together the leaders in AI. We have a huge advantage in this country, being ranked in the top 3 in the world. AI is going to have huge potential for our growth, for our public services, and I think the whole House should be fully supportive of this.
Prime Minister.
The Prime Minister has the immense privilege The Prime Minister has the immense privilege of being the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Now, Northern Ireland is a special part of our union, but one that needs particular care, attention and respect. Having a strong functioning assembly at Stormont is good for the people of Northern Ireland and good for our union. And that's why I was so pleased to see government restored there earlier this year, and I'm grateful to him for his support with that. So can he assure the House that he will continue to work to keep Stormont open, delivering for the Northern Irish people and strengthening Northern Ireland's place in our union?
Prime Minister.
Yes, and again, this is a really important point and one that matters to me personally. I worked for 5 years in Northern Ireland on some of the proposals under the Good Friday Agreement, in particular the transformation of the RUC into the Police Service of Northern Ireland. I worked with both communities there. It was for 5 years. It was very important to me, had a huge impact on me, and so I care deeply about Northern Ireland, and I absolutely agree that the institutions government needs to be up and running and want to give all support I can to the further development in Northern Ireland.
Now, as Prime Minister, he will be acutely aware of the threats that our United Kingdom faces from an axis of authoritarian states, Iran, North Korea, Russia and China. And in particular, I'm proud of the way that this House has united in standing up to Russian aggression in Ukraine. And I know that we will never waver in our commitment to the Ukrainian cause. Now, I will always be grateful for the support that he gave me when we were the first country to send Ukraine Western battle tanks, long-range missiles, and the first to offer security assurances to Kyiv. So in light of the threats that we face, can I urge him to always maintain the strength of the transatlantic alliance and ensure that NATO remains the bedrock of Western security, with the United Kingdom playing a leading role?
Yes, and NATO is, in my view, as important today as the day in which it was created in light of the challenges that we face. And it was a Labour government that was the proud co-founder of NATO, and we've repeatedly said we support NATO to the hilt.
Rishi Sunak.
Well, finally, Mr. Speaker, tomorrow is Diwali. And I became leader of my party during Diwali, and I now stand down during that same festival. So I'm proud to have been the first British Asian Prime Minister, but I was even prouder that it was not that big a deal. And that speaks volumes about the values of the British people, of our country, and of this Parliament. So will the Prime Minister join me in applauding the kindness, decency and tolerance that has always been the British way?
Yes, and I meant what I said when I said that we were all proud to see him standing there as Prime Minister, representing our diverse country. We were all proud. I think everybody in this House was. So I thank him for that. And his last question, final question as Leader of the Opposition, although judging by the speed with which his party goes through leaders, he may be back here before too long, but in the meantime, I'm sure he'll be a great champion for the people of Richmond. But, Mr. Speaker, finally, I'm sure he won't mind me disclosing to the House the contents of a letter that he wrote to me this week. My answer to it is clear. Yes, I will arrange for him to meet the relevant minister about the A66 that runs through his constituency.
Dame Meg Hillier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in Hackney, nearly 4,000 children who could fill 8 primary schools are in temporary accommodation, many outside London. This is bad for their future opportunities. It's ripping apart our communities. I welcome the government's pledge to build new homes, but will he ensure that those who cannot have a roof over their head are a top priority in that long queue for new housing?
Prime Minister.
I thank you for raising this issue. It is a source of national shame that there are just under 1.3 million households on a social housing waiting list, including, I think, 8,000 of them in Hackney. The best way to tackle overcrowding and meet housing need is to build the homes this country needs, and that's why we will deliver the 1.5 million homes over this Parliament, and the Chancellor will set out further details in just a moment.
Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I associate myself with your remarks and the remarks of the Prime Minister about the right honourable gentleman, the member for Richmond and Northallerton, and thank him for his service and wish him and the whole country a happy Diwali. Despite our political differences, I've always felt a certain kinship since the general election, when he was the only other party leader to get as wet as I did. I'm looking forward to debating the budgets with him and the Chancellor shortly, but can I wish him and his family all the best for the future. Mr. Speaker, next month's summit in Baku is a chance for the UK to regain world leadership on climate change, a role disastrously lost under the Conservatives. As this is the final summit before countries must ratchet up their new Paris agreements before 2035, will the Prime Minister take this opportunity to seize back world leadership on climate change by committing today to support the targets set out this week by the Independent Climate Change Committee and publish a programme to deliver on those?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we will seize that initiative. We've reset on the international stage, and climate is one of the biggest challenges that we face. I will be going to the conference this year, as I went, in fact, last year, as Leader of the Opposition, to continue those discussions about how we reach the very important targets that we must reach.
Sir David.
I thank the Prime Minister for his reply. I hope we can really take that world leadership back again. Another issue which the UK needs to show urgent leadership on is the escalating war in Sudan. Tens of thousands of people have been killed. 11 million Sudanese have had to flee from their homes, Mr. Speaker. The reports of mass killings and horrifying sexual violence against women are truly stomach-churning. So when the UK takes over presidency of the UN Security Council this Friday, will the Prime Minister make it a priority to secure a new resolution on preventing future atrocities, including a no-fly zone to stop the Iranian drones?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank him for raising this because it is an important issue and I don't think we discuss it enough in this House. We continue to see mounting evidence of appalling atrocities against civilians and unacceptable restrictions on humanitarian access, and working with international partners, including as penholder, as he knows, at the UN Security Council to end the violence, secure humanitarian access and ensure the protection of civilians is a major priority.
Rachel Reeves.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is this Labour government in setting up a child poverty task force which is determined to move 4.3 million children in poverty today into a better future. However, we also inherited 2.1 million older people in poverty. So will my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, agree to setting up a pensioner poverty task force so that older people don't have to worry about paying for their housing, food and heating costs, and ensure that they have dignity in later life?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the scale of poverty that we inherited in this country is truly appalling, with over 4 million children now growing up in low-income families. We'll deliver on our manifesto commitment to tackle child poverty, as we did last time in government, and we'll publish our strategy in the spring.
Colin Denny.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The ICJ has mandated that Israel ensures access to life-saving aid in Gaza under Article 2 of the Genocide Convention, yet the Israeli government has voted to effectively block its delivery. As a human rights lawyer, does the Prime Minister agree that banning UNRWA is a breach of international law? And how much more evidence does he need before calling out what is happening as a genocide and acting in line with the UK's responsibilities as a signatory of the Genocide Convention?
Minister.
I'm very worried and concerned about the decision that's just been taken by the Parliament in relation to UNRWA. There's a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, and that decision will only make it much worse, which is why I've expressed my concern about it already before today and will continue to do so. It needs to be reversed. It needs to be reversed very, very quickly indeed. I have never described what's going on in Gaza as genocide. I do agree that all sides should comply with international law.
Melanie Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last month, a Scottish Government Health Minister was forced to apologise for waiting times in my area of Fife, where some patients wait more than 2 years for treatment. My constituents deserve so much better than this. Does the Prime Minister agree that the SNP must take responsibility for 17 years of failure? And if today's budget delivers a bigger block grant to Scotland, they must sort out the mess they have made of Scotland's precious NHS.
Well, Mr. Speaker, this is the second time this has come up this afternoon in Prime Minister's questions. I hope the SNP are listening good and hard, because I'm sorry to hear her constituents have been waiting so many years for their medical treatment that they need. We are committed to the NHS, and the Chancellor will have a lot more to say about that in just a moment.
Richard Tice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government's own independent reviewer of terrorism legislation, Jonathan Hall Casey, has said repeatedly recently that it is important in incidents of terrorism that the authorities put out more information sooner in order to prevent an information gap. Does the Prime Minister agree?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, obviously I'll tread carefully in answering this question for the very reasons that you yourself set out at the beginning of this session. I think it's very important, first and foremost, that in all cases, including the particularly difficult case that the Speaker mentioned earlier, that the police and prosecutors are able to do their difficult job. And all of us in this House have a choice to make, including both candidates candidates to be the next Tory leader. They can either support the police in their difficult task, or they can undermine the police in their difficult task. And I know which side I'm on.
Rachel Blake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Minutes from here, in the communities of Victoria, Pimlico, Paddington and Covent Garden, there is an unprecedented rise in the number of people sleeping rough after 14 years of the Tory government. Will the Prime Minister update this House on the cross-departmental homelessness strategy? And does he agree with me that this Labour government has a once-in-a-generation opportunity to end rough sleeping for good?
Prime Minister.
Homelessness levels are far too high in this country. And we are developing a long-term strategy, working with mayors and local leaders to end homelessness once and for all. And taking action to tackle the root causes, Mr. Speaker, which is delivering the biggest increase in social and affordable house building in a generation. And we, of course, have picked up where the party opposite failed by abolishing no-fault evictions, preventing many renters ending up homeless.
Good job.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, we had the embarrassment of the Labour Party being sued by the Trump campaign. Then we had the national capitulation of...
Let me hear the rest of the question, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Then we had the national capitulation of the government over the sovereignty of the Chagos Islands. And now we have had the personal humiliation of the Prime Minister at the Commonwealth Heads of Government Summit. All of which begs the question, Mr. Speaker, how on earth does the Foreign Secretary still have the full confidence of the Prime Minister?
Mr. Speaker, I was intending to say that he was an upgrade on his predecessor. Of course, drove up thousands of pounds in mortgages, but I withdraw that now.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When the Prime Minister and the Chancellor discuss the importance of supporting working families, I think of the dedicated farmers in South Norfolk. The Prime Minister has constantly acknowledged the critical role of food security and the need for farmers to have certainty to plan. Can the Prime Minister confirm what action our government will be taking to back British farming in constituencies like mine?
Mr. Speaker, I welcome my honourable friend to his place. And talking of predecessors, no one did more damage to rural constituencies than his nearby predecessor, whose disastrous mini-budget crashed the economy and hurt his constituents. I do note that she's been tweeting the approval of the current Shadow Chancellor's attacks on the independent OBR, just showing the party opposite have learned absolutely nothing. Over 1,000 farms have been forced out of business due to Tory neglect, and we will turn that around, and you'll hear more about that in the budget in just a minute.
Helen Morgan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Robert Jones and Agnes Hunt Hospital in Oswestry in my constituency is home to the Veterans Orthopaedic Service, and that's by far the largest provider of veterans hospital care in the country. It's a fine example of what you can build when the NHS and the local authority work together. It costs no extra public money to set it up, but because of NHS changes in the way ICBs charge each other, it's been left with a funding shortfall. Will the Prime Minister come and visit this fantastic facility in beautiful North Shropshire and see for himself why it's so important we keep it going?
I thank the honourable member for raising that issue, and we're all grateful to our veterans for their service in protecting our country. I do understand the value of the centre that she references and the support that it provides for veterans, and we are committed to ensuring veterans receive the employment, the mental health and the housing support that they need. The upcoming budget will set out the changes that we'll be making. Thank you.
Jim Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After 14 years of failure by the last government to renew and grow the UK's infrastructure, does the Prime Minister agree with me that additional investment is needed to kickstart economic growth. And that Mr. Speaker, this is the important bit. And then investing in a new Lower Thames crossing to relieve Dartford residents from gridlock caused by overcapacity at the Dartford crossing, thereby boosting the North Kent and UK economy by £40 billion would be an excellent project to start with.
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I'm really pleased that under this government, Britain has already secured £63 billion worth of investment, which will be measured in tens of thousands of jobs. Our number one mission is growth. You'll be hearing a lot more about that in just a few minutes' time.
David Mandel.
My constituents, Colin and Mandy Mackey's 18-year-old son, Greg, died as a result of having a soft drink spiked shortly after he went to college. They welcome the fact that this government is going to continue with the legislation proposed by the previous government. But can the Prime Minister assure them that they and other campaigners will work with ministers and officials, not only in bringing forward that legislation, but to ensure that awareness is raised of this abhorrent practice and its potentially fatal consequences?
Prime Minister. Can I thank the Right Honourable Member for raising that tragic case, and I join him in paying tribute to Greg's parents. Their tireless work to raise awareness of spiking, to support victims and call for changes in the law is inspiring, given what they've been through. This government will act. We will make spiking a specific criminal offence to better protect victims and support the police in tackling these crimes. Thank you.
Alex Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In Farnborough, our leisure centre was knocked down by the Conservative Council, who made empty promises to replace it with an expensive civic hub with no viable plan to pay for it. Will the Prime Minister help secure the funding that Rushmore Council needs to rebuild our leisure centre so that Labour can start delivering change after years of Tory failure?
Prime Minister. Can I welcome my honourable friend to her place? I think she's the first Labour MP for Aldershot ever, and she's doing a superb job for her constituents. Rushmore Borough Council was left with a shortfall of over £19 million over the last 4 years. And the running down of local services has been one of the most painful features of the last 14 years. We will work hand in hand with councils, including multi-year funding settlements, and with local leaders to develop and make sure the services that are needed are there.
Final question, Mark Francois.
Thank you, sir. Prime Minister, you mentioned veterans a few minutes ago. As we approach Remembrance Tide, one group of veterans we all owe a great debt to are those who served during the Troubles in Northern Ireland. Hundreds were killed. Thousands were maimed by both Republican and so-called loyalist bombs. Many of those veterans now in the autumn of their lives. And yet you're proposing to repeal the Northern Ireland Legacy Bill, which was designed in part to protect them from endless investigation and reinvestigation. Why, sir, are you throwing those veterans to the wolves to pander to Sinn Féin?
Can I just say, the honourable member's been here for a long time. You is not me. I don't want it to be me. Please, Prime Minister.
I'm not.
Good luck.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Order! Order! Before I call the Chancellor, I would like to make a short statement. Over the last few days, ministers have made a series of new policy announcements with significant and wide-ranging implications for the government's fiscal policy and for the public finances. It is evident to me that they should have been made in this House in the first instance. The principle is clearly and unambiguously set out in the paragraph 9.1 of the Ministerial Code. The premature disclosure of the contents of this House, contents of the budget, have always been regarded as a supreme discourtesy to this House and all of its democratically elected MPs, not to mention to Mr. Speaker and the Chairman of Ways and Means. I really don't need any help. Let me remind the Treasury front bench. The budget statement and ensuing resolutions are the most important Ways and Means business of the House, Erskine May 36-33. I am disappointed by comments made by government spokespeople believing they can use precedent as an excuse. I am telling them today that they are entirely wrong. Mr. Speaker has always defended the undoubted right of this House, including opposition parties and backbenchers on all sides of this House, to be the first to hear major government policy announcements on behalf of their constituents. As Chairman of Ways and Means, I have responsibility to oversee the House's consideration of the budget fairly and impartially, and to ensure that honourable members on all sides of this House have adequate opportunity to hold the Chancellor to account. Finally, we collectively, we should all remember to respect the Chair, respect our colleagues, and to respect this House. Now, before I call the Chancellor of the Exchequer, I am remind honourable members that copies of the budget resolutions will be available to them from the Vote Office in Members' Lobby at the end of the Chancellor's statement and, of course, online. I also remind honourable members that interventions are not taken during the Chancellor's statement, nor during the replies of the Leader of the Opposition or of the Leader of the Liberal Democrats. I call the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. On July the 4th, the country voted for change. This government was given a mandate to restore stability to our economy and to begin a decade of national renewal. To fix the foundations and deliver change through responsible leadership in the national interest. That is our task, and I know that we can achieve it. My belief in Britain burns brighter than ever, and the prize on offer is immense. As my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, said on Monday, change must be felt. More pounds in people's pockets, an NHS that is there when you need it, an economy that is growing, creating wealth and opportunity for all, because that is the only way to improve living standards. And the only way to drive economic growth is to invest, invest, invest. There are no shortcuts. And to deliver that investment, we must restore economic stability and turn the page on the last 14 years. This is not the first time that it has fallen to the Labour Party to rebuild Britain. In 1945, it was the Labour Party that rebuilt our country from the rubble of the Second World War. In 1964, it was the Labour Party that rebuilt Britain with the white heat of technology. And in 1997, it was the Labour Party that rebuilt our schools and hospitals. Today, it falls to this Labour Party, to this Labour government, to rebuild Britain once again. And while this is the first budget in more than 14 years to be delivered by a Labour Chancellor. It is the first budget in our country's history to be delivered by a woman. I am deeply proud to be Britain's first ever female Chancellor of the Exchequer. To girls and young women everywhere, I say, let there be no ceiling on your ambition, your hopes and your dreams. And along with the pride that I feel standing here today, there is also a responsibility to pass on a fairer society and a stronger generation to the next generation of women. Madam Deputy Speaker, the party opposite failed our country. Their austerity broke our National Health Service. Their Brexit deal harmed British businesses. And their mini-budget left families paying the price with higher mortgages. The British people have inherited their failure. A black hole in the public finances. Public services on their knees. A decade of low growth and the worst Parliament on record for living standards. Let me begin with the public finances. In July, I exposed a £22 billion black hole at the heart of the previous government's plans. A series of promises that they made but had no money to deliver. Covered up from the British people, covered up from this House. The Treasury's reserve, set aside for genuine emergencies, spent 3 times over just 3 months into the financial year. Today, on top of the detailed document that I have provided to the House in July, the government is publishing a line-by-line breakdown of the £22 billion black hole that we inherited. It shows hundreds of unfunded pressures on the public finances this year and into the future too. The Office for Budget Responsibility have published their own review of the circumstances around the spring budget forecast. They say that the previous government, and I quote, did not provide the OBR with all the information to them. Known about these undisclosed pressures that have since come to light, then their spring budget forecast for spending would have been, and I quote again, materially different. Let me be clear. That means any comparison between today's forecast and the OBR's March forecast is false, because the party opposite hid the reality of their public spending plans. At the very same budget, they made another £10 billion worth of cuts to national insurance. It was the height of irresponsibility, and they knew it, because they had run out of road and they called an election to avoid making difficult choices. So let me make this promise to the British people. Never again will we allow a government to play fast and loose with the public finances. And never again will we allow a government to hide the true state of our public finances from our independent forecaster. That's why today I can confirm that we will implement in full the 10 recommendations from the Independent Office for Budget Responsibilities Review. But the country has inherited not just broken public finances, but broken public services too. The British people can see and they can feel that in their everyday lives. NHS waiting lists at record levels. Children in porter cabins as school roofs crumble. Trains that do not arrive, rivers filled with polluted waste, prisons overflowing, crimes which are not investigated, and criminals who are not punished. That is the country's inheritance. That is the country's to put our public finances on a stable footing. Quite the opposite. Since 2021, there have been no detailed plans for departmental spending set out beyond this year. And their plans relied on a baseline for spending this year, which we now know was wrong, because it did not take into account the £22 billion black hole. The previous government also failed to budget for costs that they knew would materialise. That includes funding for vital compensation schemes for victims of two terrible injustices.
I just mentioned respecting colleagues. The public are watching. They want to hear what the Chancellor has to say. Simmer down.
I would politely suggest that honourable members listen to this, because it includes funding for vital compensation schemes for victims of two terrible injustices: the infected blood scandal and the Post Office Horizon scandal. The Leader of the Opposition rightly made an unequivocal apology for the injustice of the infected blood scandal on behalf of the British state. But he did not budget for the costs of compensation. Today, for the very first time, we will provide specific funding to compensate those infected and those affected in full. With £11.8 billion in this budget. And I am also today setting aside £1.8 billion to compensate victims of the Post Office Horizon scandal. Redress that is long overdue for the pain and injustice that they have suffered. Madam Deputy Speaker, the leadership campaign for the party opposite has now been going on for over 3 months. But in all that time, not one single apology for what they did to our country. Because the Conservative Party has not changed. But this is a changed Labour Party, and we will restore stability to our country once again. The scale and seriousness of the situation that we have inherited cannot be underestimated. Together, the hole in our public finances this year, which recurs every year, the compensation schemes that they did not fund, and their failure in our public finances this year, which recurs every year, the compensation schemes that they did not fund, and their failure to assess the scale of the challenges facing our public services means that this budget raises taxes by 40%. Any Chancellor standing here today would have to face this reality. And any responsible Chancellor would take action. That is why today I am restoring stability to our public finances and rebuilding our public services. As a former economist at the Bank of England, I know what it means to respect our economic institutions. Thanks. I want to put on record my thanks to the Governor of the Bank, Andrew Bailey, and to the Independent Monetary Policy Committee. Today, I can confirm that we will maintain the MPC's target of 2% inflation, as measured by the 12-month increase in the Consumer Prices Index. I want to thank James Bowler, the Permanent Secretary to the Treasury, and my team of officials. Madam Deputy Speaker, I would also like to thank my predecessors as Chancellor of the Exchequer for their wise counsel as I have prepared for this budget. In particular, I would like to thank the former Right Honourable Member for Spelthorne for his invaluable advice in this weekend's papers, where he concluded that his mini-budget, and I quote, wasn't perfect. Well, for once, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think him and I are in absolute agreement. Finally, I want to thank Richard Hughes and his team at the Office for Budget Responsibility for their work in preparing today's economic and fiscal outlook. Let me now take the House through that forecast. The cost of living crisis under the last government stretched household finances to their limit, with inflation hitting a peak of above 11%. Today, the OBR say that CPI inflation will average 2.5% this year, 2.6% in 2025, then 2.3% in 2026, 2.1% in 2027, 2.1% in 2028, and 2.0% in 2029. Next, I move on to economic growth. Today's budget marks an end to short-termism. So I am pleased that for the first time, the OBR have published not only 5-year growth forecasts, but a detailed assessment of the growth impacts of our policies over the next decade too. And the new Charter for Budget Responsibility, which I am publishing today, confirms that this will become a permanent feature of our framework. The OBR forecast that real GDP growth will be 1.1% in 2024, 2.0% in 2025, 1.8% in 2026, 1.5% in 2027, 1.5% in 2028, and 1.6% in 2029. And the OBR are clear. This budget will permanently increase the supply capacity of the economy, boosting long-term growth. Every budget, it might sound shocking to them, but this government is boosting long-term economic growth. Every budget that I deliver will be focused on our mission to grow the economy. And underpinning that mission are the 7 key pillars of our growth strategy, developed and delivered alongside business, all driven forward by our excellent Financial Secretary to the Treasury. First, and most important, is to restore economic stability. That is my focus today. Second, increasing investment and building new infrastructure is vital for productivity. So we are catalysing £70 billion of investment through our National Wealth Fund. And we are transforming our planning rules to get Britain building again. Third, to ensure that all parts of the UK can realise their potential, we are working with the devolved governments and partnering with our mayors to develop local growth plans. Fourth, to improve employment prospects and skills, we are creating Skills England, delivering our plans to make work pay and tackling economic inactivity. Fifth, we are launching our long-term modern industrial strategy and expanding opportunities for our small and medium-sized businesses to grow. Sixth, to drive innovation, we are protecting record funding for research and development to harness the full potential of the UK's science base. And finally, to maximise the growth benefits of our clean energy mission, we have confirmed key investments such as carbon capture and storage to create jobs in our industrial heartlands. Our approach is already having an impact. Just 2 weeks ago, we delivered an international investment summit which saw businesses commit £63.5 billion of investment into our country, creating nearly 40,000 jobs across the United Kingdom. But we cannot undo 14 years of damage in one go. Economic growth will be our mission for the duration of this Parliament. Madam Deputy Speaker, in our manifesto, we set out the fiscal rules that would guide this government. I am confirming those today. Our stability rule and our investment rule. The stability rule means that we will bring the current budget into balance so that we do not borrow to fund day-to-day spending. We will meet this rule in 2029-30 until that becomes the 3rd year of the forecast. From then on, we will balance the current budget in the 3rd year of every budget held annually each autumn. That will provide a tougher constraint on day-to-day spending so that difficult decisions cannot be constantly delayed or deferred. The OBR say that the current budget will be in deficit by £26.2 billion in 2025-26 and £5.2 billion in 2026-27, before moving into surplus of £10.9 billion in 2027-28, £9.3 billion in 2028-29 and £9.9 billion in 2029-30, meeting our stability rule 2 years early. Monthly public sector finance data show that government borrowing in the first 6 months of this year was already running significantly higher than the OBR's March forecast. And so the OBR confirmed today that borrowing in this financial year is now £127 billion, reflecting the inheritance left by the party opposite. The increase in the net cash requirement in 2024-25 is lower than the increase in borrowing, at £22.3 billion higher than the spring forecast. Because of the action that we are taking, borrowing falls from 4.5% of GDP this year to 2.1% of GDP by the end of the forecast. Public sector net borrowing will be £105.6 billion in 2025-26, £88.5 billion in 2026-27, £72.2 billion in 2027-28, £71.9 billion in 2028-29, and £70.6 billion in 2029-2030. Madam Deputy Speaker, before I come to tax, it is vital that we are driving efficiency and reducing wasteful spending. In July, to begin delivering and dealing with our inheritance, I made £5.5 billion of savings this year. Today, we are setting a 2% productivity, efficiency and savings target for all departments to meet next year by using technology more effectively and joining up services across government. As set out in our manifesto, I will shortly be appointing our COVID Corruption Commissioner. They will lead our work to uncover those companies that used a national emergency to line their own pockets. Because that money belongs in our public services and taxpayers want that money back. And I can confirm today that David Goldstone has been appointed as the chair of the new Office for Value for Money to help us realise the benefits from every pound of public spending. Today, I am also taking 3 steps to ensure that welfare spending is more sustainable. First, we inherited the last government's plans to reform the work capability assessment. We will deliver those savings as part of our fundamental reforms to the health and disabilities benefit system that my right honourable friend, the Work and Pensions Secretary, will bring forward. Second, I can today announce a crackdown on fraud in our welfare system, often the work of criminal gangs. We will expand DWP's counter-fraud teams, using innovative new methods to prevent illegal activity and provide new legal powers to crack down on fraudsters, including direct access to bank accounts to recover debt. This package saves £4.3 billion a year by the end of the forecast. Third, the government will shortly be publishing the Get Britain Working white paper, tackling the root causes of inactivity with an integrated approach across health, education and welfare. And we will provide £240 million for 16 trailblazer projects targeted at those who are economically inactive and most at risk of being out of education, employment or training, to get people into work and to reduce the benefits bill. Before a government could consider any change to a tax rate or threshold, it must ensure that people pay what they already owe. So we will invest to modernise HMRC systems using the very best technology and recruit additional HMRC compliance and debt staff. We will clamp down on those umbrella companies who exploit workers, increase the interest rate on unpaid tax debt to ensure that people pay on time, and go after the promoters of tax avoidance schemes. These measures to reduce the tax gap raise £6.5 billion by the end of the forecast. And I want to thank the Exchequer Secretary for his outstanding work on this agenda. Madam Deputy Speaker, I know that for working people up and down our country, family finances are stretched and paychecks don't go as far as they once did. So today I am taking steps to support people with the cost of living. It was the Labour government that introduced the national minimum wage in 1999. It had a transformative impact on the lives of working people. As promised in our manifesto, we asked the Low Pay Commission to take account of the cost of living for the first time. I can confirm that we will accept the Low Pay Commission recommendation to increase the national living wage by 6.7% to £12.21 an hour, worth up to £1,400 a year for a full-time worker. And for the first time, we will move towards a single adult rate phased in over time by initially increasing the national minimum wage for 18 to 20-year-olds by 16.3% as recommended by the Low Pay Commission, taking it to £10 an hour. A Labour policy to protect working people being delivered by a Labour government once again. Second, I have heard representations from colleagues across this House about the carers allowance and the impact of the current policy on carers looking to increase the hours that they work, including from the Honourable Members for Shipley, the Honourable Member for Scarborough and Whitby, and the Right Honourable Member for Kingston and Surbiton too. Carers allowance currently provides up to £81.90 per week to help those with additional caring responsibilities. Today, I can confirm that we are increasing the weekly earnings limit to the equivalent of 16 hours at the national living wage per week, the largest increase in carers allowance since it was introduced in 1976. This means that a carer can now earn over £10,000 a year while receiving carers allowance, allowing them to increase their hours where they want to and keep more of their money. I am also concerned about the cliff edge in the current system and the issue of overpayments. My right honourable friend, the Work and Pensions Secretary, has announced an independent review to look at the issue of overpayments, and we will work across this House to develop the right solutions. Third, we will provide £1 billion from next year to extend the Household Support Fund and discretionary housing payments to help those facing financial hardship with the cost of essentials. Fourth, having heard representations from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, Trussell and others to reduce the level of debt repayments that can be taken from a household's universal credit payment each month by reducing it from 25% to 15% of their standard allowance. This means that 1.2 million of the poorest households will keep more of their award each month, lifting children out of poverty, and those who benefit will gain an average of £420 a year. Madam Deputy Speaker, our plan to make work pay will also protect working people. I know that the party opposite are deeply interested in our plans here. Having seen their colleagues repeatedly dismissed at short notice, I know that they are worried about their future under the Right Honourable Member for North West Essex. So they should rest easy, knowing that our plan will protect working people from unfair dismissal. It will safeguard them from bullying in the workplace. And it will improve their access to paternity and maternity leave. I hope that the new Shadow Cabinet will soon be grateful for these increased protections at work. It is right that we protect those who have worked all their lives. In our manifesto, we promised to transfer the Investment Reserve Fund in the Mine Workers Pension Scheme to members. And I have listened closely to my honourable friends for Easington, Doncaster Central, Blaenau Gwent and Ayr, Carrick and Cumnock on this issue. Today, we are keeping our promise so that working people who powered our country receive the fair pension that they are owed. Our manifesto committed to the triple lock, meaning spending on the state pension is forecast to rise by over £31 billion by 2029-30, to ensure that our pensioners are protected in their retirement. This commitment means that while working age benefits will be uprated in line with CPI at 1.7%, the basic and new state pension will be uprated by 4.1% in 2025-26. This means that over 12 million pensioners will gain up to £470 next year, up to £275 more than if uprated by inflation. The pension credit standard minimum guarantee will also rise by 4.1%, from around £11,400 per year to around £11,850 a year for a single pensioner. While I have sought to protect working people with measures to reduce the cost of living, I've had to take some very difficult decisions on tax. I want to set out my approach to fuel duty. Baked into the numbers that I inherited from the previous government is an assumption that fuel duty will rise by RPI next year and that the temporary 5p cut will be reversed. To retain the 5p cut and to freeze fuel duty again would cost over £3 billion next year. At a time when the fiscal position is so difficult, I have to be frank with the House that this is a substantial commitment to make. I have concluded that in these difficult circumstances, while the cost of living remains high, and with a backdrop of global uncertainty, increasing fuel duty next year would be the wrong choice for working people. It would mean fuel duty rising by 7p per litre. So I have decided today to freeze fuel duty next year, and I will maintain the existing 5p cut for another year too. There will be no higher taxes at the petrol. There will be no higher taxes at the petrol pumps next year. Madam Deputy Speaker, the last government made cuts of £20 billion to employees and self-employed national insurance in their final two budgets. These tax cuts were not honest. Because we now know that they were based on a forecast which the OBR say would have been materially different. It would have been materially different had they known the true extent of the last government's cover-up. Since July, I have been urged on multiple occasions to reconsider these cuts, to increase the taxes that working people pay and see in their payslips. But I have made an important choice today, to keep every single commitment that we made on tax in our manifesto. So I say to working people, I will not increase your national insurance, I will not increase your VAT, and I will not increase your income tax. Working people will not see higher taxes in their payslips as a result of the choices that I am making today. That is a promise made and a promise fulfilled. But any responsible Chancellor would need to make difficult decisions today, to raise the revenues required to fund our public services and to restore economic stability. So in today's budget, I am announcing an increase in employers' national insurance contributions. We will increase the rate of employers' national insurance by 1.2 percentage points to 15% from April 2025. And we will reduce the secondary threshold, the level at which employers start paying national insurance on each employee's salary, from £9,100 a year to £5,000. This will raise £25 billion per year by the end of the forecast period. I know that this is a difficult choice. I do not take this decision lightly. We are asking businesses to contribute more, and I know that there will be impacts of this measure felt beyond businesses too, as the OBR have set out today. But in the circumstances...
Order, Chancellor! Order! Our constituents are watching. They need to be able to hear the Chancellor. Simmer down. Chancellor.
But in the circumstances that I have inherited, it is the right choice to make. Successful businesses depend on successful schools. Healthy businesses depend on a healthy NHS. And a strong economy depends on strong public finances. If the party opposite chooses to oppose this choice, then they are choosing more austerity, more chaos, more instability. This is the choice that our country faces too. As I make this choice, I know it is particularly important to protect our smallest companies. So, having heard representations from the Federation of Small Businesses and others, I am today increasing the employment allowance from £5,000 to £10,500. This means 865,000 employers won't pay any national insurance at all next year. And over 1 million will pay the same or less than they did previously. This will allow a small business to employ the equivalent of 4 full-time workers on the national living wage without paying any national insurance on their wages. Madam Deputy Speaker, let me now come to capital gains tax. We need to drive growth, promote entrepreneurship and support wealth creation, while raising the revenue required to fund our public services and restore our public finances. Today, we will increase the lower rate of capital gains tax from 10 to 18% and the higher rate from 20 to 24%, while maintaining the rates of capital gains tax on residential property at 18 and 24% too. This means the UK will still have the lowest capital gains tax rate of any European G7 economy. Alongside these changes to the headline rates of capital gains tax, we are maintaining the lifetime limit for business asset disposal relief at £1 million to encourage entrepreneurs to invest in their businesses. Business asset disposal relief will remain at 10% this year before rising to 14% in April 2025 and to 18% from 2026-27, maintaining a significant gap compared to the higher rate of capital gains tax. Together, the OBR say that these measures will raise £2.5 billion by the end of the forecast. In a sign of this government's commitment to supporting growth and entrepreneurship, we have already extended the Enterprise Investment Scheme and the Venture Capital Trust schemes to 2035, and we will continue to work with leading entrepreneurs and venture capital firms to ensure that our policies support a positive environment for entrepreneurship in the UK. Next, inheritance tax. Only 6% of estates will pay inheritance tax this year. I understand the strongly held desire to pass down savings to children and grandchildren, so I am taking a balanced approach in my package today. First, the previous government froze inheritance tax thresholds until 2028. I will extend that freeze for a further 2 years until 2030. That means the first £325,000 of any estate can be inherited tax-free, rising to £500,000 if the estate includes a residence passed to direct descendants, and £1 million when a tax-free allowance is passed to a surviving spouse or civil partner. Second, we will close the loophole created by the previous government, made even bigger when the lifetime allowance was abolished, by bringing inherited pensions into inheritance tax from April 2027. Finally, we will reform agricultural property relief and business property relief. From April 2026, the first £1 million of combined business and agricultural assets will continue to attract no inheritance tax at all. But for assets over £1 million, inheritance tax will apply with a 50% relief at an effective rate of 20%. This will ensure that we continue to protect small family farms and with three-quarters of claims unaffected by these changes. I can also announce that we will apply a 50% relief in all circumstances on inheritance tax for shares on the alternative investment market and other similar markets, setting the effective rate of tax at 20%. Taken together, these measures raise over £2 billion by the final year of the forecast. Next, I can confirm that the government will renew the tobacco duty escalator for the remainder of this Parliament at RPI plus 2%. Increase duty by a further 10% on hand-rolling tobacco this year, introduce a flat rate duty on all vaping liquid from October 2026, alongside an additional one-off increase in tobacco duty to maintain the incentive to give up smoking. And we will increase the soft drinks industry levy to account for inflation since it was introduced, as well as increasing the duty in line with CPI each year going forward. These measures will raise nearly £1 billion per year by the end of the forecast period. Madam Deputy Speaker, we want to support the take-up of electric vehicles, so I will maintain the incentives for electric vehicles in company car tax from 2028 and increase the differential between fully electric and other vehicles in the first-year rates of vehicle excise duty from April 2025. These measures will raise around £400 million by the end of the forecast period. Madam Deputy Speaker, let me update the House on our plans for air passenger duty. And I can see the right honourable gentleman's ears have pricked up. Air passenger duty has not kept up with inflation in recent years, so we are introducing an adjustment, meaning an increase of no more than £2 for an economy-class short-haul flight. But I am taking a different approach when it comes to private jets. Increasing the rate of air passenger duty by a further 50%. That is equivalent to £450 per passenger for a private jet to, say, California? Madam Deputy Speaker, let us now turn to our high street businesses. I know for them, a major source of concern is business rates. From 2026-27, we intend to introduce 2 permanently lower tax rates for retail, hospitality and leisure properties, which make up the backbone of our high streets across the country. And it is our intention that it is paid for by a higher multiplier for the most valuable properties. But the previous government created a cliff edge next year as temporary reliefs end. So I will today provide 40% relief on business rates for the retail, hospitality and leisure industry in 2025-26, up to a cap of £110,000 per business. Alongside this, the small business tax multiplier will be frozen next year. Next, I can confirm that alcohol duty rates on non-draft products will increase in line with RPI from February next year. But nearly 2/3 of alcoholic drinks sold in pubs are served on draft. So today, instead of uprating these products in line with inflation, I am cutting draft duty by 1.7%. Which means a penny off the pints in the pub. Alongside the changes I am making today, I am publishing a corporate tax roadmap, providing the business certainty called for by the CBI, the British Chambers of Commerce and the Institute for Directors. This confirms our commitment to cap the rate of corporation tax at 25%, the lowest in the G7 for the duration of this Parliament, while maintaining full expensing and the £1 million annual investment allowance and keeping the current rates of research and development relief to drive innovation. Madam Deputy Speaker, in our manifesto, we made a number of commitments to raise funding for our public services. First, I have always said that if you make Britain your home, you should pay your taxes here too. So today I can confirm we will abolish the non-dom tax regime. And we will remove the outdated concept of domicile from the tax system from April 2025. We will introduce a new residence-based scheme with internationally competitive arrangements for those coming to the UK on a temporary basis, while closing the loopholes in the scheme designed by the party opposite. To further encourage investment into the UK, we will also extend the temporary repatriation relief to 3 years and expand its scope, bringing billions of pounds of new funds into Britain. The Independent Office for Budget Responsibility say that this package of measures will raise £12.7 billion over the next 5 years. Next, the fund management industry provides a vital contribution to our economy. But as our manifesto set out, there needs to be a fairer approach to the way that carried interest is taxed. So we will increase the capital gains rates on carried interest to 32% from April 2025. And from April 2026, we will deliver further reform to ensure that the specific rules for carried interest are simpler, fairer and better targeted. In our manifesto, we committed to reforming stamp duty land tax to raise revenues while supporting those buying their first home. We are increasing the stamp duty land tax surcharge for second homes, known as the higher rate for additional dwellings, by 2 percentage points to 5%, which will come into effect from tomorrow. This will support over 130,000 additional transactions from people buying their first home or moving home over the next 5 years. Next, we are committed to reform the energy profits levy on oil and gas companies. I can confirm today that we will increase the rate of the levy to 38%, which will now expire in March 2030, and we will remove the 29% investment allowance to ensure that the oil and gas industry can protect jobs and support our energy security. So we will maintain the 100% first-year allowances and the decarbonisation allowances too. Finally, 94% of children in the UK attend state schools. To provide the highest quality of support and teaching that they deserve, we will introduce VAT on private school fees from January 2025. And we will shortly introduce legislation to remove their business rates relief from April 2025 too. We said in our manifesto that these changes, alongside our measures to tackle tax avoidance, would bring in £8.5 billion in the final year of the forecast. I can confirm today that they will in fact raise over £9 billion to support our public services and restore our public finances. That is a promise made and a promise fulfilled. Madam Deputy Speaker, I have one final decision to take on tax today. The previous government froze income tax and national insurance thresholds in 2021, and then they did so again after the mini-budget. Extending their threshold freeze for a further 2 years raises billions of pounds, money to deal with the black hole in our public finances and repair our public services. Having considered this issue closely, I have come to the conclusion that extending the threshold freeze would hurt working people. It would take more money out of their payslips. I am keeping every single promise on tax that I made in our manifesto. So there will be no extension of the freeze in income tax and national insurance thresholds beyond the decisions by the previous government. From 2028-29, personal tax thresholds will be uprated in line with inflation once again. When it comes to choices on tax, this government chooses to protect working people every single time. Madam Deputy Speaker, these are the choices I have made: to restore economic stability and to protect working people. The next choice I make is to begin to repair our public services. In recent months, we have conducted the first phase of the spending review to set departmental budgets for 2024-25 and 2025-26. And I want to thank my right honourable friend, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, for his tireless work with colleagues from across government. Because I have taken difficult decisions on tax today, I am able to provide an injection of immediate funding over the next 2 years to stabilise and to support our public services. The next phase of the spending review will report in late spring, and I have set the overall envelope today. Day-to-day spending from 2024-25 onwards will grow by 1.5% in real terms. And today, departmental spending, including capital spending, will grow by 1.7% in real terms. At the election, we promised there would be no return to austerity. Today, we deliver on that promise. But given the scale of the challenge that we are facing in our public services, That means there will still be difficult choices in the next phase of the spending review. Just as we cannot tax and spend our way to prosperity, nor can we simply spend our way to better public services. So we will deliver a new approach to public service reform, using technology to improve public services and taking a zero-based approach so that taxpayers' money is spent as effectively as possible, and so we focus on delivering our key priorities. In the first phase of the spending review, I have prioritised day-to-day funding to deliver on our manifesto commitments. I want every child to have the very best start in life, and the best possible start to the school day too. And I know my right honourable friend, the Education Secretary, shares my ambition. So I am today tripling investment in breakfast clubs to fund them in thousands of schools. I am increasing the core schools budget by £2.3 billion next year to support our pledge to hire thousands more teachers into key subjects. So that our young people can develop the skills that they need for the future, I am providing an additional £300 million for further education. And finally, this government is committed to reforming special educational needs provision to improve outcomes for our most vulnerable children and to ensure that the system is financially sustainable. To support that work, I am today providing a £1 billion uplift in funding, a 6% real terms increase from this year. There is no more important job for government than to keep our country safe, and we are conducting a strategic defence review to be published next year. And as set out in our manifesto, we will set a path to spending 2.5% of GDP on defence at a future fiscal event. Today, I am announcing a total increase to the Ministry of Defence's budget of £2.9 billion next year, ensuring that the UK comfortably exceeds our NATO commitments and providing guaranteed military support to Ukraine of £3 billion per year for as long as it takes. Last week, alongside my right honourable friend, the Defence Secretary, I announced in addition to this further support to Ukraine on top of our NATO commitment through our £2.26 billion contribution to the G7's Extraordinary Revenue Acceleration Agreement, repaid using profits from immobilised Russian sovereign assets. And as we approach Remembrance Sunday, it is vital that we take time to remember those who have served our country so bravely. So I am today announcing funding to commemorate the 80th anniversary of VE and VJ Day next year, to honour those who have served at home and abroad. We must also remember those who experienced the atrocities of the Nazi regime firsthand. I would like to pay tribute to Lily Ebert, the Holocaust survivor and educator who passed away aged 100 earlier this month. I am today committing a further £2 million to Holocaust education next year, so that charities like the Holocaust Educational Trust can continue their work to ensure that these vital testimonies are not lost and are preserved for the future. Madam Deputy Speaker, to repair our public services, we also need to work alongside our mayors and local leaders. We will deliver a significant real terms funding increase for local governments next year, including £1.3 billion of additional grant funding to deliver essential services, with at least £600 million in grant funding for social care and £230 million to tackle homelessness and rough sleeping. We are today confirming that Greater Manchester and the West Midlands will be the first mayoral authorities to receive integrated settlements from next year, giving mayors meaningful control of the funding for their local areas. And to support our high streets, we are taking action to deal with the sharp rise in shoplifting that we have seen in recent years. We will scrap the effective immunity for low-value shoplifting introduced by the party opposite. And having listened closely to organisations like the British Retail Consortium and the trade union USDOR, I am providing additional funding to crack down on the organised gangs which target retailers and to provide more training to our police officers and retailers to stop shoplifting in its tracks. Finally, I am today providing funding to support public services and drive growth across Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. Having discussed the matter with the First Minister of Wales, Eluned Morgan, and my honourable friends for Llanelli and Pontypridd, I am today providing £25 million to the Welsh Government next year for the maintenance of coal tips to ensure that we keep our communities safe. And to support growth, including in our rural areas, we will proceed with city and growth deals in Northern Ireland, in Causeway Coast and Glens, and the Mid-South West. And we will drive growth in Scotland, a key priority for Scottish Labour and our leader Anna Sawar, including with a city and growth deal in Argyll and Bute. This budget provides the devolved governments with the largest real terms funding settlements since devolution, delivering an additional £3.4 billion to the Scottish Government through the Barnett formula. Funding which must now be used effectively in Scotland to deliver the public services that the people of Scotland deserve. This budget also provides £1.7 billion to the Welsh Government and £1.5 billion to the Northern Ireland Executive in 2025-26. I said that there would be no return to austerity, and that is the choice that I have made today. Madam Deputy Speaker, to rebuild our country, we need to increase investment. The UK lags behind every other G7 country when it comes to business investment as a share of our economy. That matters. It means the UK has fallen behind in the race for new jobs, new industries and new technology. By restoring economic stability and by establishing the National Wealth Fund to catalyse private funding, we have begun to create the conditions that businesses need to invest. But there is also a significant role for public investment. For too long, we have seen Conservative chancellors cut investment and raid capital budgets to plug gaps in day-to-day spending. The result is clear for all to see. Hospitals without the equipment they need. School buildings not fit for our children. A desperate lack of affordable housing. Economic growth held back at every turn. Under the plans I inherited, public investment was set to fall from 2.5% to 1.7% of GDP. But in Washington last week, the International Monetary Fund were clear. More public investment is badly needed in the UK. So having listened to the case made by the former Governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney, former Treasury Minister Jim O'Neill, and the former Cabinet Secretary Gus O'Donnell, among others, I am confirming our investment rule. As set out in our manifesto, we will target debt falling as a share of the economy. Debt will be defined as public sector net financial liabilities, or net financial debt for short, a metric that has been measured by the Office for National Statistics since 2016 and forecast by the Office of Budget Responsibility since that date too. Net financial debt recognises that government investment delivers returns for taxpayers. By counting not just the liabilities on a government's balance sheet, but the financial assets too. This means that we count the benefits of that investment, not just the costs. And we free up our institutions to invest, just as they do in Germany, France and Japan. Like our stability rule, our investment rule will apply in 2029-2030, until that becomes the third year of the forecast. From that point onwards, net financial debt will fall in the third year of every forecast. Today, the OBR say that we are already meeting our target 2 years early. with net financial debt falling by 2027-28, with £15.7 billion of headroom in the final year. So that we drive the right incentives in government investments, we will introduce 4 key guardrails to ensure capital spending is good value for money and drives growth in our economy. First, our portfolio of new financial investments will be delivered by expert bodies like the National Wealth Fund, which must, by default, earn a rate of return at least as large as that on gilts. Second, we will strengthen the role of institutions to improve infrastructure delivery. Third, we will improve certainty, setting capital budgets for 5 years and extending them at every spending review every 2 years. Finally, we will ensure that there is greater transparency for capital spending, with robust annual reporting of financial investments based on accounts audited by the National Audit Office and made available to the Office for Budget Responsibility at every forecast. Taken together with our stability rule, these fiscal rules will ensure that our public finances are on a firm footing while enabling us to invest prudently alongside business. The capital plans that I now set out to drive growth across our country and repair the fabric of our nation are only possible because of our investment rule. Let me set out those investment plans. Today, we are confirming our plans to capitalise the National Wealth Fund to invest in the industries of the future, from gigafactories to ports to green hydrogen. Building on these investments, my right honourable friend, the Business Secretary, is driving forward our modern industrial strategy. Working with businesses and organisations like Make UK to set out the sectors with the biggest growth potential. Today, we are confirming multi-year funding commitments for these areas of our economy, including nearly £1 billion for the aerospace sector to fund vital research and development, building on our industry in the East Midlands, the South West and in Scotland. Over £2 billion for the automotive sector to support our electric vehicle industry and develop our manufacturing base, building on our strengths in the North East and the West Midlands. And up to £520 million for a new life sciences innovative manufacturing fund. For our world-leading creative industries, we will legislate to provide additional tax relief for visual effect costs in TV and film. And we are providing £25 million for the North East Combined Authority, which they plan to use to remediate the Crown Works studio site in Sunderland, creating 8,000 new jobs. To unlock these growth industries of the future, we will protect government investment in research and development with more than £20 billion worth of funding. This includes at least £6.1 billion to protect core research funding for areas like engineering, biotechnology and medical science. Through Research England, other research councils and the national academies. We will extend the Innovation Accelerators programme in Glasgow, in Manchester and in the West Midlands. And with over £500 million of funding next year, my right honourable friend, the Science, Technology and Innovation Secretary, will continue to drive progress in improving reliable, fast broadband and mobile coverage across our country, including in rural areas. We committed in our manifesto to build 1.5 million homes over the course of this Parliament. And my right honourable friend, the Deputy Prime Minister, is driving that work forward across government. Today, I am providing over £5 billion of government investment to deliver our plans on housing next year. We will increase the Affordable Homes programme to £3.1 billion, delivering thousands of new homes. We will provide £3 billion worth of support in guarantees to boost the supply of homes and support our small house builders. And we will provide investment to renovate sites across our country, including at Liverpool Central Docks, where we will deliver 2,000 new homes, and funding to help Cambridge realise its full growth potential. Alongside this investment, we will put the right policies in place to increase the supply of affordable housing. Having heard representations from local authorities, social housing providers and from Shelter, I can today confirm that the government will reduce right-to-buy discounts and local authorities will be able to retain the full receipts from any sales of social housing so that we can reinvest them back into the housing stock and into new supply. By doing this, we will give more people a safe, secure and affordable place to live. We will provide stability to social housing providers with a social housing rent settlement of CPI plus 1% for the next 5 years. And we will deliver on our manifesto commitment to hire hundreds of new planning officers to get Britain building again. We will also make progress on our commitment to accelerate the remediation of homes following the findings of the Grenfell inquiry, with £1 billion of investment to remove dangerous cladding next year. The last government made a number of promises on transport, but it failed to fund them. Working with my right honourable friend, the Transport Secretary, I am changing that. We are today securing the delivery of the Transpennine upgrades to connect York, Leeds, Huddersfield and Manchester. Delivering fully electric local and regional services between Manchester and Staley Bridge by the end of this year. With a further electrification of services between Church Fenton and York by 2026. To help grow our economy across the north of England with faster and more reliable services. We will deliver East-West Rail to drive growth between Oxford, Milton Keynes and Cambridge, with the first services running between Oxford, Bletchley and Milton Keynes next year, and trains between Oxford and Bedford running from 2030. We are delivering railway schemes which improve journeys for people across our country, including upgrades at Bradford Forster Square Station, improving capacity at Manchester Victoria and electrifying the Wigan to Bolton line. My right honourable friend, the Transport Secretary, has also set out a plan for how to get a grip of HS2. Today, we are securing delivery of the project between Old Oak Common and Birmingham, and we are committing the funding required to begin tunnelling work to London Euston Station. This will catalyse private investment into the local area, delivering jobs and growth. I am also funding significant improvements to our roads network. For too long, potholes have been an all too visible reminder of our failure to invest as a nation. Today, that changes, with £500 million increase in road maintenance budgets next year, more than delivering on our manifesto commitment to fix an additional 1 million potholes each year. We will provide over £650 million of local transport funding to improve connections across our country, in towns like Crewe and Grimsby, and in our villages and rural areas from Cornwall to Cumbria. And while the previous government's policy was for the bus fare cap to end this December, we understand how important bus services are for our communities. And so we will extend the cap for a further year, setting it at £3 until December 2025. Finally, we will deliver £1.3 billion of funding to improve connectivity in our city regions, funding projects like the Brierley Hill Metro extension in the West Midlands, the renewal of Sheffield Supertram, and the West Yorkshire Mass Transit, including in Bradford and Leeds. Madam Deputy Speaker, to bring new jobs to Britain and to drive growth across our country, we are delivering our mission to make Britain a clean energy superpower, led by my right honourable friend, the Energy Secretary. Earlier this month, we announced a significant multi-year investment between government and business into carbon capture and storage, creating 4,000 jobs across Merseyside and Teesside. Today, I am providing funding for 11 new green hydrogen projects across England, Scotland and Wales. They will be amongst the first commercial-scale projects anywhere in the world, including in Bridgend, East Renfrewshire and Barrow-in-Furness. We are kick-starting the Warm Homes Plan by confirming an initial £3.4 billion over the next 3 years to transform 350,000 homes, including 250,000 low-income and social homes. And we will establish GB Energy, providing funding next year to set up GB Energy at its new home in Aberdeen. Overall, we will invest an additional £100 billion over the next 5 years in capital spending, only possible because of our investment rule. The OBR say today that this investment will drive growth across our country in the next 5 years, and in the longer term, increase GDP by up to 1.4%. It will crowd in private investment, meaning more jobs and more opportunities in every corner of the UK. That is the choice that I have made, to invest in our country and to grow our economy. Today, I am setting out 2 final areas in which investment is so badly needed to repair the fabric of our nation. Madam Deputy Speaker, my right honourable friend, the member for Lewisham West and East Dulwich and I joined the Labour Party because of the condition of our schools in the 1980s and the 1990s under Conservative governments. When we were at secondary school, my sixth form was a couple of prefab huts in the playground. My school, like so many others, was rebuilt by the last Labour government. But today, after 14 years of Tory government, progress has gone backwards. School roofs are crumbling and millions of children are facing the same backdrop as I did. I will be the Chancellor that changes that. So today, I am providing £6.7 billion of capital investment to the Department for Education next year, a 19% real terms increase on this year. That includes £1.4 billion to rebuild over 500 schools in the greatest need, including St Helens Primary School in Hartlepool and Mercia Academy in Derby, and so many more across our country. And we will provide £2.1 billion more to improve school maintenance, £300 million more than this year, ensuring that all our children can learn somewhere safe, including dealing with RAC-affected schools in the constituencies of my right honourable friends for Watford, Stourbridge, Hyndburn and beyond. Alongside investment in new teachers and funding through thousands of new breakfast clubs, this government is giving our children and young people the opportunities that they deserve. Madam Deputy Speaker, I come to our most cherished public service of all, our NHS. My right honourable friend, the Health Secretary, is beginning to repair the damage of the last 14 years. In our first week in office, he commissioned an independent report into the state of our health service by Lord Darcy. Its conclusions were damning. While our NHS staff do a remarkable job, and we thank them for it, it is clear that in so many areas, we are moving in the wrong direction. 100,000 infants waited over 6 hours in A&E last year. 350,000 people are waiting a year for mental health support. Cancer deaths here higher than in other countries. It is simply unforgivable. In the spring, we will publish a 10-year plan for the NHS. to deliver a shift from hospital to community, from analogue to digital, and from sickness to prevention. Today, we are announcing a down payment on that plan to enable the NHS to deliver 2% productivity growth next year. These reforms are vital, but we should be honest. The state of the NHS that we have inherited after, and I quote Lord Darcy, the most austere decade since the NHS was founded, means that reform must come alongside investment. So today, because of the difficult decisions that I have taken on tax, welfare and spending, I can announce that I am providing a £22.6 billion increase in the day-to-day health budget and a £3.1 billion increase in the capital budget over this year and next. This is the largest real terms growth in day-to-day NHS spending outside of COVID since 2010. Let me set out what this funding is delivering. Many NHS buildings have been left in a state of disrepair. So we will provide £1 billion of health capital investment next year to address the backlog of repairs and upgrades across our NHS. To increase capacity for tens of thousands more procedures next year, we will provide a further £1.5 billion for new beds in hospitals across our country, new capacity for over 1 million additional diagnostic tests, and new surgical hubs and diagnostic centres, so that people waiting for their treatment can get it as quickly as possible. My right honourable friend, the Health Secretary, will be setting out further details of his review into the new hospital programme in the coming weeks and publishing in the new year. But I can tell the House today that work will continue at pace to deliver those 7 hospitals affected by the RAC crisis, including West Suffolk Hospital in Bury St Edmunds and Leighton Hospital in Crewe. And finally, because of this record injection of funding, because of the thousands of additional beds that we have secured, and because of the reforms that we are delivering in our NHS, we can now begin to bring waiting lists down more quickly and move towards our target for waiting times to be no longer than 18 weeks. By delivering on our manifesto commitment for 40,000 extra hospital appointments a week, that is the difference that this Labour government is making. Madam Deputy Speaker, the choices I have made today are the right choices for our country. To restore stability to our public finances, to protect working people, to fix our NHS, and to rebuild Britain. That doesn't mean these choices are easy, but they are responsible. If the party opposite disagrees with the choices that I have made, then they must answer. What choices would they make? Would they again choose the path of irresponsibility, the path taken by Liz Truss, and ignore the problems in our public finances altogether? If that is their choice, they should say so. But let me be clear. If they disagree with my choices on tax, then they would not be able to protect working people. If they disagree with our plans to fund public services, then they would have to cut schools and hospitals. And if they disagree with our investment rule, then they would have to delay or cancel thousands of projects which drive growth across our country. This is a moment of fundamental choice for Britain. I have made my choices, the responsible choices, to restore stability to our country, to protect working people. More teachers in our schools, more appointments in our NHS, more homes being built, fixing the foundations of our economy, investing in our future, delivering change, rebuilding Britain. We on these benches commend those choices, and I commend this statement to the House.
Number 51, the first motion entitled Provisional Collection of Taxes must be decided without debate. Will the Chancellor of the Exchequer please move formally?
I beg to move.
The question is that pursuant to Section 5 of the Provisional Collection of Taxes Act 1968, provisional statutory effect shall be given to the following motions. Value added tax, private school fees, motion number 34. Stamp duty, land tax, additional dwellings, purchases before the 1st of April 2025, motion number 35. Stamp duty, land tax, purchases by companies, motion number 37. Rates of tobacco products duty, motion number 46. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Shh. We now come to the motion entitled Income Tax Charge. It is on this motion that the debate will take place today and on the succeeding days. The questions on this motion and on the remaining motions will be put at the end of the budget debate on Wednesday, the 6th of November. I call the Chancellor of the Exchequer to move the motion formally.
I beg to move.
The question is that income tax is charged for the tax year 25 to 26, and it is declared that this is expedient in the public interest, that this resolution should have statutory effect under the provisions of the Provisional Collection of Taxes Act 1968. I now call the Leader of the Opposition.
Madam Deputy Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, on the day that he took office, the Prime Minister said that he wanted to restore trust to British politics with action, not words. Well, today, his actions speak for themselves, with a budget that contains broken promise after broken promise, and reveals the simple truth that the Prime Minister and the Chancellor have not been straight with the British people. Time and again, we Conservatives warned Labour would tax, borrow and spend far beyond what they were telling the country. And time and again, they denied they had such plans. But today, the truth has come out. Proof that they planned to do this all along. Because, Madam Deputy Speaker, today's budget sees the fiscal rules fiddled. Borrowing increased by billions of pounds. Inflation-busting handouts for the trade unions. Britain's poorest pensioners. Britain's poorest...
Order! Just as we respected the Chancellor and heard her speak, we will hear the Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, Britain's poorest pensioners squeezed, welfare spending out of control, and a spree of tax rises they promised the working people of this country they would not do. National insurance, up. Capital gains tax, up. Inheritance tax, up. Energy taxes, up. Business rates, up. First-time buyer stamp duty, up. Pensions tax, up. They have fiddled the figures. Mr. Speaker. They don't like it, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Order. The public will also want to hear what the Leader of the Opposition has to say. And shouting whilst I can see you will mean that you will not be called to speak later on. Simmer.
They don't like it, but this is the truth. They have fiddled the figures. They have raised tax to record levels. They have broken their promises, and it is the working people of this country that are going to pay the price. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Chancellor and Prime Minister have tried to say that they had no choice. But be in no doubt, their misleading claims about the state of the economy are nothing but a cynical political device. Today's situation is a world away from the genuinely bleak legacy that we Conservatives inherited from the last Labour government. Borrowing. The Chancellor forgot to point out, borrowing £1 in every 4 that they spent. Debt rising every year and unemployment at 8%. Now, I understand the Chancellor's shameless political motivations, why it suits her to cook up a false justification for her agenda. But today, the OBR has in fact declined to back up her claims of a fictional £22 billion black hole. It actually appears nowhere in their report, Madam Deputy Speaker. And it is deeply, deeply disappointing that she has sought to politicise the independent OBR that should be above party politics. But as she now knows, her playing politics has done real damage to our economy. She talked about being a Bank of England economist. Well, as the Bank of England's former chief economist has said, Labour's approach has generated fear and foreboding and uncertainty amongst consumers, businesses and investors. The rhetoric of this Chancellor and this Prime Minister damaging the British economy for political purposes. Now, you only need to look at the facts to see that the Chancellor's claims about her economic inheritance are nonsense. Labour inherited an economy with inflation back at its 2% target, mortgage rates being cut and unemployment low. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, when we left office, the United Kingdom was the fastest growing advanced economy in the world. And when it comes to the public finances, not once has the Chancellor acknowledged that we took the right decision to spend £500 billion to protect the British people from the impact of COVID and Putin's war. And let me remind you, not only did the party opposite support all those interventions, they wanted us to go even further, Madam Deputy Speaker. And when I made the tough choices to fix the public finances afterwards, the Prime Minister and Chancellor opportunistically opposed me every step of the way. So I will take no lectures from those two about difficult decisions. But because of those decisions that we made, the Chancellor inherited lower borrowing than France, America, Italy and Japan, and the second lowest debt in the entire G7. So any which way you look at it, Labour's claims about their inheritance are purely ludicrous. These are her choices, so stop blaming everyone else and take responsibility for them. Now, let me turn to the substance of those choices. During the election, the Chancellor repeatedly promised that her plans were fully funded. Only a few weeks ago, the Prime Minister said the budget would balance the books. But this budget does no such thing and reveals they have not been straight with the British people.
Oh, come on. Come on.
I can see you even when you're hiding behind another colleague.
No.
Yelling across the chamber is not on. The public and our constituents are watching. I know emotions are high and I expect some noise, but have the confidence to shout closer and I will definitely call you out. Leader of the Opposition.
A few weeks ago, the Prime Minister said the budget would balance the books. But this budget does no such thing and reveals that they haven't been straight with the British people. Because today, the Chancellor has launched an enormous borrowing spree, saddling our children and grandchildren with billions upon billions pounds more debt, pushing up interest rates, leaving our economy more exposed to future shocks, and leading the OBR today to now forecast higher inflation in every year of the forecast. And her decision to let borrowing rip make a total nonsense of her claims on the state of the public finances. Because if they truly were in such a dire strait, as she has said, what we should have seen today is a significant reduction in borrowing to repair them, not the splurge that she's just unleashed, Madam Deputy Speaker. Instead, what we see today, borrowing higher in every year of the forecast, debt higher in every year of the forecast. Now she has tried to cover up that splurge by fiddling the fiscal rules. According to the Institute of Fiscal Studies, the new measure will not actually even be a constraint on the amount she can borrow. And it is hard to escape the suspicion, they say, that the government is attracted to this change by the fact that it would allow for significantly more borrowing without any need for tough choices elsewhere. Fiscal fiddling is what they have called it. And the Chancellor herself actually agrees, because she specifically told the British people she wouldn't change the debt target. Because, and I quote, she said, "I'm not going to fiddle the figures to get better results." But that is exactly what she has done. She has gone back on her word and fiddled the figures so that she can borrow billions more. Broken promise after broken promise, and working people will pay the price. Now, the reason the Chancellor has increased borrowing and increased taxes is because she has totally failed to grip public spending. First, she has no meaningful plan. First, she has no meaningful plan to deliver the £20 billion worth of savings, announcing pay rises to the unions without getting any productivity-enhancing reforms in return. The Chancellor also scrapped her predecessor's plan to get the civil service back to its pre-pandemic numbers. She doesn't seem to think that the civil service can be reduced by a single person. And the Chancellor has no plan to control welfare spending. Yet if we simply got working-age welfare spending on people with a disability or health condition back to pre-COVID levels, that would free up £30 billion worth of savings. So whether it is scrapping our plans to shrink the civil service or their failure to control welfare spending, this is not her inheritance, Madam Deputy Speaker. These are her choices. And the result: higher spending, higher borrowing, higher taxes. It's broken promise after broken promise, and working people paying the price. And Madam Deputy Speaker, let me turn next to growth and remind the Prime Minister and Chancellor that they did in fact inherit the fastest growing economy in the G7, and that is testament to the last government boosting investment by introducing full expensing, increasing the labour supply by expanding childcare, reforming welfare and cutting tax on work. All decisions the OBR said would increase growth. Now, the Chancellor has said that growing the economy is the government's #1 priority. The Prime Minister even said that higher growth would come very quickly. Well, to be fair, the Prime Minister and Chancellor have had a rapid impact on growth. As their plans for the economy became clear, survey after survey showed business confidence plummeting. And no wonder. The government's own assessment says its French-style labour laws will impose a £5 billion... Well, they will be explaining it to the businesses in their constituency that their labour laws, by their own assessment, will impose a £5 billion direct cost on business, disproportionately hitting smaller businesses. And as business group after business group has pointed out, the tax rises on jobs and enterprise in today's budget will hobble growth. A poll tax on business is what they've called it. But despite these record-breaking tax rises, despite fiddling the figures, despite letting borrowing soar, today the OBR has forecast growth is going to be lower under this government than it was forecast to be under the Conservatives. That's the change they have wrought. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, this is what happens when the Labour Party is led by people who have no experience of business and enterprise. Relentlessly talking down our economy, delivering a tidal wave of anti-business regulations, destroying our flexible labour market and raising taxes to the highest level in our country's history. It's the classic Labour agenda: higher taxes, higher borrowing, no plan for growth, and working people paying the price. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, during the election campaign, the Prime Minister specifically said there would be no tax surprises under Labour. The Chancellor went even further, saying she wanted to bring taxes down. Each time they made these promises, we warned they were not telling the truth. And today, the Chancellor and Prime Minister have done what they were always planning to do, but chose to get hidden from the British people. Far from reducing taxes as a result of today's budget, never in the history of our country will taxes be higher than they are under this Labour government. Now, they specifically promised that they wouldn't raise tax on working people. The Chancellor said Labour will not put up income tax, national insurance or VAT. Just this month, the Prime Minister gave, and I quote, an absolute commitment to not raising tax on working people. So what does today's budget do? It raises tax on working people by increasing national insurance and breaking Labour's promise. As the Independent Institute of Fiscal Studies have said, this is a straightforward breach of their manifesto. Because, as the OBR have made clear, this tax rise is passed through entirely to working people. Even since she started speaking, the IFS have already confirmed that the vast majority of this tax increase will hit working people through lower pay. But you don't need to take it from the IFS or even the OBR. You can take it from the Chancellor herself. She has previously described her tax rise as a jobs tax, which takes money out of people's pockets. And not only that, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Chancellor also said the problem with national insurance is that it is a tax purely on people who go to work and those who employ them. So far from protecting working people, she is literally raising the only major tax that exclusively hits working people. But it doesn't stop there. Businesses on the British high street, your taxes are going up. Businesses investing in British energy, your taxes are going up. The small business owner looking to reap the rewards of years spent growing a business and creating jobs, your taxes are going up. The young couple saving to buy their first home, your taxes are going up. The family...
Mr. Streeting, you promised me this morning. Let's try and keep our promises.
Wow. I'm sure the front bench would explaining to the young couple and their constituency saving to buy their first home that their taxes are going up. To the family wanting to pass on their farm or their business to their children, your taxes are going up. The parents sacrificing to give their kids the best start in life, your taxes are going up. They're taxing your job. They're taxing your business. They're taxing your home. They're taxing your savings. I said it during the election campaign. You name it, they will tax it, and that is exactly what they have done. Broken promise after broken promise, and working people paying the price. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, from the final time, from this dispatch box, let me deliver.
Well, he's wiped the floor with Rachel.
Let me deliver some basic truths. Government can foster growth, but it can't magically conjure it up. We need businesses, workers, investors and entrepreneurs to all back this country and build our economy. It doesn't matter whether your income comes in a pay packet from investments, in dividends or profits. It is a poor politics that is so focused on what people receive that it fails to see that what matters is what people put in. Yeah. The only way to grow the economy and to create wealth is for people to put in more. So when you create a negative environment for business, when you undermine confidence in our country, when you vilify and penalise people for doing exactly what we need them to do, which is to invest, take risks and work hard, you don't create growth, you hold back growth. Yeah. And more than that, the promise of growth today does not pay the bills. The growth tomorrow does not pay the bills today. This is not the first government to peddle the borrow to grow myth. But time and again, we have seen the same ending. Not higher growth, but higher debt, higher inflation and higher taxes. But Madam Deputy Speaker, whatever you think about the economic arguments around today's budget, there is a more fundamental point that I want to conclude with. The Prime Minister has talked relentlessly about trust. Yet today's budget reveals, above all, that the Labour Party... Today's budget reveals, above all, that the Labour Party did not tell the truth. They said they wouldn't fiddle the figures. They have. They said they wouldn't increase borrowing. They have. They said they wouldn't raise taxes on working people. They have. Broken promise after broken promise, and it is the working people of this country that will pay the price.
Order. Order. I call the Chair of the Treasury Select Committee, Dame Meg Hillier.
I'm just getting ready to listen.
It's a genuine, relevant point of order.